Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Bosch Season 7, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, we get the conclusion to that whole, Pedro Alvarez in the cell with that dude. The thing was saying his name is Chichi. And I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, because he's like, and it kind of answered a bit of a question I had last episode about, even just murdering kids is still a big no-no in prison. And he's kind of scaring Alvarez. But the moment he's pumping him for information, like who gave the hit and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, you're insider, aren't you? And it's like, yep, he has like a camera on him. He couldn't get Alvarez to admit who actually ordered it, but it was kind of saying that Gladys had nothing to do with it. At the very least in that fashion, that she didn't order. It was meant to be a warning. It wasn't meant to be, no one was supposed to get hurt. But he's like, yeah, you set fire to a place and no one's supposed to get hurt, right? But at the very, Alvarez is too scared to ever, say anything about who actually, ordered it. So I forgot what eventually led to them, going and meeting up with Gladys and arresting her. But they do. And obviously when the time comes, first and foremost, Jerry screws the pooch big time. The fact of the matter is he's just out in the hallway. He's on his phone. It's like, right, don't let her talk. It's like, right. He even says, oh, don't talk. And he's on his phone, right? And then a lady just walks up having a full-blown conversation and Bosch walks up like, what the hell are you doing? Like, are you on duty or what? You doing your job? And it's like, and he wants to act like, oh, get off his phone. And it's like, yeah, I was about picking up the kids. Shut up. What are you doing? That's not even a rookie move. That's just a super asinine move. Like, how'd you let that happen? And when Bosch calls him out later on being like, yo, she has her lawyer just happens to show up before we really get good into questioning her. And it's like, oh, that's kind of on you. To be fair, not to be fair, Jerry screwed the pooch right there. I was like, that was just that was terrible on his part. But the reason why he's trying to getting good with his ex, because he's like, right, I'm going to pick him up because he's so concerned about he's failing on every part. Like I said, his professional life, his personal life, everything is kind of suffering because he's not in his right mind at the time, even though he wants to make it seem like he is. Obviously, they found a gun and some drugs in there. I'm wondering, was that legitimately hers or not? She said it wasn't. It was someone else's place. I'm sure that was BS and stuff like that. But still, it's right. The getting cat food or whatever. And it's I didn't see no cat in there. She's like, yeah, and that's why, can't you tell? That's why I'm so worried and so concerned. But I love the whole thing of when Vega comes in to speak Spanish to her. She's like, I speak English, I don't understand that. But then later, literally next sentence responds to her in English to what Vega had said in Spanish. So, maybe the argument is she was saying yeah, I don't. Well, no, because it's she was making it seem like she doesn't understand Spanish, which we just saw you out, it's just, once again, it's just that Edgar thing blew my mind. I'm like, what are you doing? I get it, your personal life is kind of taking a hit, but man, you're super unprofessional here. And now because of that, they weren't able to get too far with Gladys because her lawyer immediately shows up. But at the very least, because of the drugs they found, she is going to be locked up for a few days, which Harry blows up at Jerry but Jerry's like, nah, I made a mistake. He was upset because Harry bitched him when it came to the interview. It's oh, you're bringing Vega in, that's a good idea. It's no, Edgar, maybe you should stay. And it's what are you getting pissed at? It's your fault. He has every right to call you out for your BS right now. That's why I'm you don't have a leg to stand on in this situation. But then Botch kind of calls him out, and he's calls him out, and Edgar's like, oh, don't act like you haven't made any mistakes, say Harry. And it's yeah, but I think for Harry it's yes, it's a little hypocritical, but at the same time it's never to this extent. Come on, that was a bonehead move, Jerry, you can admit that. And the problem is they're having this full-blown argument in front of Crates, Barrow, Vega, and Pierce, and just all of them are kind of peering up over their cubicles, and then the captain shows up. He's like, oh, is there a problem? It's nah, Cap, we're good. So it's and the moment he answered the phone, Maddie was like, oh, you good? This wrong time isn't. He's just, yeah. So, which that was an interesting conversation, because Antonio talked about the fact is when at dinner about losing a kid never gets any easier. It's always a hard thing, which Matt is sadly that's kind of what you sign up for in the job. The same thing if you the terrible things that kind of come with it when you sign up for the military. And Antonio was yeah, it's probably like that for the police too. It's does it get any easier? And it's every year it gets harder. And obviously there's a conversation about Sonia, and it's kind of like, he's like, tell me more about her. And Harry mentioned all this stuff. It's like, right, her dad getting like deported because he was here on a green card, and his green card was taken away when he got caught with a DUI. She's only able to call him once a month. She was a sweet girl, like telling all these like personal things, and just like, it's like at the end of the day, she was just a, regular 10-year-old girl. Like, what more do you need to know beyond that, But it's like all those characteristics are just, because once again, it's just like, especially because she's just labeled as the tamale girl, I feel like that takes away a little bit of it. But I think like Bosch saying what he said, I notice that every time I say it, it's almost like I'm saying the word botched instead of Bosch. I do see, I kind of caught myself like at least 2 times already in this recording. Who knows how many times I've done it in previous ones, but I think it kind of like, it's like, right, don't forget she was a little girl. Like, don't get caught up in like the stupid nickname that the media gave her, or maybe other people did and the media just latched onto it. Once again, that just rubs me the wrong way, especially because I feel like it's Scott Anderson who started it, and I'm just like, once again, dude has always rubbed me the wrong way. He's just such a little scoundrel that it just like, the moment, like I said, the moment I saw him and like, and he said Tamale Girl, it's just like, oh, screw you, Scott. You're on my shit list. You have been for a while. But regardless, Edgar tries to go pick up his boys, but it's like, nah, like, she's like, I made sure, like, they had other plans, they went to the movies and stuff like that. She's like, I didn't know if you were going to actually show up this time, and I didn't want them disappointed. He's like, come on. And she's like, Edgar, like, he's like, give me a chance. She's like, why? I was like, it's kind of messed up. He's messed up like twice, but to be fair, that's of what we know. It has been 4 months since season 6, so like, I mean, probably even more so at this point by this episode, but it's like, the 2 moments him screwing up is what we've seen. He's probably been very absent previously as well. It wasn't just a New Year's thing in first episode, or coming to get them on his day that he's supposed to be with them. Like, the fact is, I think it's been time and time again. So it's like, why should I give you a second chance? You're failing. Not just these, like, it was once or twice, sure, but it's like, it's been happening a little too frequently. Maybe, it's stuff that we haven't seen. But when Edgar's talking to his, first and foremost, he talks to Bosch about the fact is, like, you have a problem, like, you have a conversation with me. Yes, I messed up, but don't call me out in front of everyone. Like, we have that conversation, we have it privately. But for Bosch, it's like, I don't have enough time to, like, wait for you to get your mess together. It's like, especially because this case, because he doesn't want Sonia to get, like, treated like she doesn't matter. This case is important. Like, he doesn't want her to be like the other 3 photos on his desk. But, so yes, because for Bosch, all cases are very important to him, because once again, if everyone doesn't count, nobody counts. So he takes every case very personal, and like Edgar bumbling things the way he is, it's like you are screwing things up. It's like you're besmirching, like, this Sonia deserves our 100%. Like her mom and the other lady that died, and her 8-year-old, like, there's a lot of death here that didn't have to happen. We have to get our shit together. Like, you have your personal stuff, that's fine. Buckle down when it comes to the case. Yes, Harry has blended personal and work together, but still. Speaking of, we did see him kind of sneak off to go to the judge's place. I'm like, that's still got to be a secret relationship. I doubt even Maddie knows about that. I guess it's just a conversation he's not willing to have, but obviously I know Edgar doesn't know about that, but which I'm also curious, because we haven't seen her for a couple episodes. I'm curious, because we haven't seen her since the first episode, is where things stand between Edgar and Joan, like where things are in that department. I'm sure, like, it's not just his relationship with his ex as well as his sons that's in it's that relationship, if it's still going on, for all we know. But what I thought was interesting is when he was talking to his therapist, literally everything she was asking about, like, it's like, insomnia. He's like, nah. How's your relationship with your ex? Oh, great. Relationship with the boy? Oh, great. We went to the movies. It's like, I love it, because at first he kind of skewed it. Was like, oh yeah, like, it was technically true, they went to the movies, but it's not like a we as in you did. And he's like, oh, we went to see Jumanji and stuff like that. It's like he's lying out his teeth, because, I mean, yes, Bosch is the same way. Like, he'd never admit he needs help, like, and Edgar's kind of rubbed off, like, Bosch is kind of rubbed off on that way, because also it would admit opening up about a lot of stuff. And I guess for him, he doesn't want, like, it's almost like giving Avro the satisfaction to know that you're driving me insane, that you're kind of darkening me and haunting me. Like, the fact is, it's like you were a bastard in life, and in even death, you're kind of haunting me. Like, I guess, like, on some level, maybe Edgar doesn't want to give that win to Avro, that you're kind of the reason why my mind's kind of other places, why I'm distracted. I'm kind of failing on both being a cop as well as, like, you know, my personal life. I mean, maybe it's just the fact is he doesn't want to admit he needs help. Because it's easier just to be, in some cases, in their minds, I'm sure it's like, it's easier just to be strong, put up a strong front, like, kind of seeing, I guess it's just like, I don't want to admit that, like, I'm feeling off. You know, maybe it makes him feel weaker in some shape or form. But even the therapist is like, oh, you seem a little anxious. He's like, nah, I'm just eager for this to be over. And she just keeps writing stuff down. And you're like, yeah, she's not buying any of that. So we'll see where things kind of go from there. They do have, at the funeral, Bosch does confront Mickey because it's like, do you even sleep at night? He's like, I sleep perfectly fine. It's like, I know it was you, cabron. And he was just like, fuck you. And it just, Bosch bounces. But it's like, yeah, man, that is messed up. Like, because it's like, Collins even said, like, oh, you see that cross and rose? That was courtesy of Mickey. It's like, oh, I bet you he been paid for the mariachi band. It's like, that is messed up. It's like, you are literally responsible for their deaths. And you act like it's not, you had the audacity to show up at the funeral. It's like, oh, like, I'm such a concerned citizen, a member of this community, and want to show my respect. It's like, no, shut up. It's like, do you feel no regrets at all? But tying that together, we have Gladys in prison, and I thought that was so interesting. Like, the moment she rolls up there, some people are like, oh, like, she walked by and this lady's like, you know too much. I was like, oh, boy. Like, I thought it was interesting because I would have thought, like, Gladys would have been the main antagonist. I thought she was kind of running things, but it's like, no, she's the banker. She's like, she's a drug dealer, sure, and she seems like she's more powerful than she is. She shouldn't be underestimated, but it's still like nah, you're not top management. You're still consorting with a gang, and even to them, you're still like nothing. You're like a business partner, but you're nobody of note. Hence why later on they kill her. Luckily, not luckily, but she did pass on a message to Vega. But like the moment she got there, it's like they're like, oh, you know too much. It's like, oh, they're gonna try and kill you. Oh wow! And I thought she was gonna be a badass and like fight back. I mean, she probably did fight back, but it's like she's not the hardened criminal you thought she would be. And for her to get got like that, I mean, like, hell, once again, that's a criminal world. Anyone can get got at any point in time. But that still surprised me, you know? Just as she left a message with Vega previously, at an earlier point in the episode, it's like, wow. Because it shows you that Mickey's the real danger. He's the one really running things. Not less even he's middle management. And he's... once again, we don't know if it's like the landlord people, like whether or not they're actually involved in this or not, like whether they're the ones that hired the gangs to do it. But it seems like for now, Mickey seems like the top suspect with all of this. He gave the orders and everything, but we don't know if he was working for someone else or got paid by someone else. Whatever the case may be. So there's that. Their lead into this is dead. They also have to be careful with Alvarez because he could easily get it too if they're not careful, because she was going to be like their biggest like tie, because like she wasn't going to talk until she was about to talk because she knew her life was in danger. She wanted to save herself, but sadly help wasn't able to get there in time. So there is that angle of things. Another avenue in this episode is Chandler hooking Vincent up with a place. And let's just skip to the fact is he's an idiot. I mean, she literally told you one thing not to do, and that was not to leave the place, don't order anything, this and that. She gave you the clearest instructions. She gave you, and he was such, I think it's just like he's such an entitled prick that he's like, no, I'd rather stay, I'll deal with the media and stuff like that. And she's like, no, it isn't just about the media. The fact of the matter is, because of how big this story has gotten, it's not just the original victims that have come after you. More victims have come out the woodwork, and that means more charges, and that means that they can arrest you for not just the charges that were already held against you, but because technically these charges being added on count as new charges, so they could arrest you and they could deny you bail, because it's like, look how many more people came out of the work judge, and you be sitting in jail the entire time. And like, they couldn't do that. And she's like, it's the government. They can do whatever they want. You know, it's like, so she gave him said, just stay here. Don't contact your wife, don't do anything, and he couldn't help himself. I mean, he didn't contact his wife, he contacted his mistress. It's like you were literally told not to do that. I mean, especially because literally Chandler is bending over backwards to help you out. She met with a dude from the CEC, and he's like, all right, here's some insider trading stuff, 2 million, names, numbers. The fact of the matter is, I'm going to need you to go help me go and talk to make it so that my client doesn't get any jail time. So it's like she's doing all this work for you. He had to be on camera to be like, yes, I have all this, yada, yada, yada. I mean, his mistress wants to go to court, then be there to support him, but it's like, no, my wife's going to be there. And it's like, oh, Maddie showed up to, drop off the laptop so he can watch the video and everything. But it's like, yeah, made sure to hide the fact is your mistress was there. But we see that someone was outside. It's like, okay, you're dead. Oh, yeah, he's dead. He's super dead. Like, and he has no one to blame but himself. Granted, what could be potentially worse is that his mistress ends up catching a stray because of him. Either like he ends up dead and she ends up dead, or the messed up thing is that he gets to live and then she ends up dying. So that's going to be the messed up thing of like she dies because of you and everything. But I definitely see him dying. Like whoever it is someone he severely screwed over, and it's like, oh, I'm not just going to like wait for you to go to court. I'm going to kill you. Hell, for all we know, Chandler might catch a stray too, because it's like, oh, you're going to defend this monster. It might turn into that type of thing. So I mean, Maddie came and visited him, so like they could easily get caught up in his BS because he couldn't help himself. He had to invite his mistress over, and now whoever that is knows where you live. I mean, it might not just be them either. Like they might rally other people who've been screwed over by you and confront you. Like there could be a whole mob here to tear you apart. So it's like, oh, you had to be such an idiot, Vincent. You had to be an entitled like idiot because well, not poor bastard, because you kind of got no sympathy for him, but you're like, oh, you're undoing, just because you can't help yourself. I mean, there got to be something inside of him for him to go to the trouble of like spray painting stuff to look like gold bricks and scamming at people out of millions of dollars, because it was like I think like the prosecutor was going like, how about we set his bail for $230 million for like every person he scammed, and it's like the amount of money he scammed out of people, and it's like, yeah, so like because I think it's also basically sociopathic, because it shows you like, oh, once again, I think sociopath is kind of the word, because it's like, right, he cares about the money, but he doesn't care about them, the people. He doesn't feel bad about what he did. It's just, once again, I'm too much of a coward to face jail time, so, which we kind of see why when we look at Gladys's situation. So it's understandable, because things could definitely go sideways. So we'll wait and see whether my predictions end up coming true, whether it's this episode or later episode in the season. But I think he's going to get got by whoever it is that followed his mistress to him. I was about to say, not unless that's an inside thing, like she's working with whoever it is, but it's like, nah, I doubt it. Well, you never know, but I'm kind of leaving it like 80-20. Like 20% I believe like the mistress might be on him, but 80% like, nah, like I think she's just an unknowing accomplice, in the sense that like she led them there. So I think lean more that way, but we'll see. Another angle to this episode, obviously, Irv is still dealing with the aftermath of like, oh, he's meeting with Mayor Lopez about everything, and it's like, right, thanks, Gladys is a part of this. It's like, why threatening and stuff like that. It's like, okay, cool. She wants basically this case closed as soon as possible, which Irving's like, it'll take as long as it takes, but the fact is that she wants things kind of shut down quickly, just because I think the optics of the case, and it's like to kind of show that her administration is on top of it. Like the sooner this case is closed out, the better the publicity is for them, because the longer it's out there, it's like, oh, you're not doing anything, especially when it's like one of the victims was a 10-year-old girl. I think the 8-month-year-old the 8-month pregnancy is one thing, but it's like when you can put a name and a face to the 10-year-old girl, that's when like that's what really gets like people's attention. That's the attention grabber. So I think that's why they're kind of leaning into that. But even like Lopez was like, oh yeah, you met with Francis. I was like, yeah, I did. Why? He's like, oh, you heard he's stepping down. He's like, oh no, that's not even what we talked about. She's like, okay. And it's like, okay, what's up with that? Like, because I guess she's trying to find out whether Irv is trying to make secret moves behind her back or something. Maybe that kind of lends itself more to why she dislikes him. But it's like, man, like, it just seems personal. Like, I mean, it's so sad because, like, he did back you, but I guess for her, it's like, you did that because maybe she found out he had ulterior motives. It's like, you did that just so Killeran couldn't win. Like, you didn't do it because you believed in me, or like, I don't, maybe she doesn't believe in his dedication to the city. Maybe it is simply like, I want a Latino chief in your place. I don't know. It just seems like she has an issue with him personally, but on TV threw him under the bus saying, Chief Irving, things can't stay the same. We have to do better. Throwing him under the bus, making it seem like he's not doing enough. He's the one that's saying the case will take as long as it takes. We're trying to make sure we do this right. We get the right people and make sure it sticks. And it's like, you're the one that wanted to rush things, and now you try to like turn everything in the investigation against him. It's like, yo, and once again, Lance Reddit gives you that look like, motherfucker. He hits that look so hard in everything he does. It's so good. He's so imposing, but he gives you that look like, I know she didn't just do that. I know she didn't just do that. It's like, wow, that sucks. But Irving's got something up his sleeve. He basically gets a dude, Brown, to we find it. It's like, right, I got a job for you, and the guy's like, I'm suspicious. He's like, think of it as a favor for me, and he's like, now I'm even more suspicious. But it turns out he needs Brown to be Lopez's driver, so that we could basically secretly dig up some dirt on her because the use against her is like, oh, you going to screw me? I can play this game. I can get rough. I can get in the dirt with you if you need me to. It's like, for you to throw me under the bus, I'm gonna get some dirt to throw you under the bus, but also probably get some insight into like who she's trying to fill Francis's position with on the commission, so the board, so that she can sway things more. Like, he probably just wants inside information on everything she's doing, but if there's some dirt that he can throw to muddy up her name, then so be it. But at one point, like, I think it is crossing Irv's mind whether, like, all of this is what he's going to do in the future, especially when he's holding, like, his son in his hand, and it's just, like, he's just so, like, a little small and frail, you know? I think it does put a lot of stuff in perspective, and I think, the big question is, at the end of the day, what is Irv going to do? Like, is he going to still try for the second term? Like, how... I guess it all depends on how this whole Lopez situation plays out. We'll see on that front. But other than this, there's also the Billet situation. She goes to Mank about, potential, like, anything he's hurt. Because obviously it's like, she gets confirmation from him. He's like, yeah, that definitely looks like it was a cop that did, but don't worry, I'm going to keep it low-key. I'm not going to say any names and stuff like that, but I'm going to listen out for you. She's like, I already made a report. He's like, ugh, yikes. She's like, was that a mistake? He's like, no. But it's just like, Lieutenant making a complaint. Like, he's like, basically, it's like a pillow full of snakes or something. He's like, even he knew it was like, oh, that's going to go sideways. I figured as much. How she reluctantly brought it up at the end to her girlfriend last episode. I was like, oh yeah, like, it definitely was kind of like a move. Even she was like, I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. Later on, Thorne comes to her being like, yo, if you knew it was one of my people, she's like, I never said it was specifically one of your people. And he's like, almost like, wait, you didn't? So I was like, you kind of slipped up, because that means it was some of your people that did that. Either they came to you or maybe you gave them the go-ahead. I don't know. Because obviously, like... the captain is like, okay, I support you and everything. What happened to your car? She's like, my car? He's like, to you and your car. But like, the fact is, you kind of went around me and just went straight to IA. Makes me look bad, because it makes it seem like, oh, you felt like you couldn't come to me first. You had to supersede me because you felt like I wasn't... Like, the optics of it make it seem like, oh, I wasn't going to do my job and do right by you. To be fair, you and Billet have beef. It was supposed to get squashed last season, but I'm sure there's still residuals of that. Like, her leaking all that stuff to Anderson back in season 5, I'm sure still doesn't sit well. But two of the officers... came to talk to Billets in private, like, yo, so we were responding to something and we asked for backup, and backup didn't come. Luckily, it turned out to be nothing, but it could have still been something that went super sideways, and we would have been left high and dry. Well, as they say, like, metaphorically speaking, with our dick in our hands. But it turns out the people who it was is the two people that Billets, like, tore down in front of everybody. And it's like, right, we brought it up to Thorne, but you know how that is. He said he'd look into it, but, we take that with a grain of salt. So, and I think in her mind, it's like, right, they probably did. I think that's also why they probably brought it to her attention, too, because it's like, yeah, that probably happened around the time your car was getting tagged. So Thorne probably knows about it, but is also like, nah, I'm not gonna let my boys get thrown to the bus. It's like I'm reprimanding them in my own way, but nothing too severe. Once again, not unless he was in on it as well. But that's just an interesting development. I think that's gonna get interesting, especially because we're like it's not necessarily tied together, but it is a whole conversation for Pierce and Vega because it's like, right, this version of this unit of homicide is potentially coming to an end. I was like, right, I keep forgetting that like this place is literally on its last leg, and it's like, all right, so transfers, Pierce is like, oh, what about like West Bureau, and it's like there's 3 slots. It's like, no, it's 1, and she's like, what are you talking about? It's like Bosch and Jerry, like they're definitely going to get 2 of those spots, so there's really only 1, and it's like, well, Bosch might not even want to go there, and it's like, Bosch is a legend in his own right. And Jerry, it's like, yeah, maybe Jerry, but it still leaves 2 open spots. It's like, yes, you're a viable person, stuff like that. So is Vega. Study your orals, and then like at the same time, like Vega came to ask her about it, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna tell you the same thing I told Rondell. You're both a shoo-in for it. She's like, I don't want. She's like, but Rondell's going to be the one to get. She's like, why? It's like, because of our issues. Like, dude, what happened last season? That was last season. You don't have to worry about it. There's no issues between us. She's like, okay, good. So it's still a thing of like, and she's like, at the end of the day, it's not my choice. It's West Bureau's decision. Like the captain there or whatever, he's the one that ultimately decides. They ultimately get to decide whether you get it or not. So that's definitely going to be interesting. That probably is going to lead to some issues for Vega and Pierce, because it's going to be a thing of, right, they're going to be both vying for the same position, and it's like 1 to 2 open slots. Maybe you both will get in, because it also depends on what Harry does, because there's certain things I know about Harry because of the books that like I know the show hasn't touched on. I mean, because I don't know because I have to look into it too, because I've never read the books. I'm curious like how much of like was adapted, like how much was kept the same, and like what was kind of majorly changed or a little changed with the adaptation. I don't know, because there are certain avenues about Bosch's profession. Maybe that'll be something they kind of touch on at the end of the series, but I'll wait till then to kind of discuss about those points. But yeah, it's just an interesting more side plots in that regard. So I'm wondering, is like the Vega and Pierce thing, is that going to be affected in any shape or form by like everything with like Billets dealing with like that homophobic crap, and just her car being tagged and her being called out and everything. We'll see. I'm really interested to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's what I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.